there's a piece of news that is really troubling, and nobody in America is going to deal with it. The crucial thing is we are not going to pay down our national debt, nor are we going to take the measures necessary to pay down our national debt. The reason I discuss this is because today the Wall Street Journal is reporting on a development that people who have actually studied American governance have known about for years. Apparently, the U.S. debt is going to cost us more in the near future than our own national defense. That's just the service on our own debt. Thanks to the weakness of the global economy, there was tremendous appetite for American debt, right? We were able to sell our debt and everybody was going to buy it because America was still the best bet in the global economy. But that could soon be ending. According to the Wall Street Journal, the Congressional Budget Office estimates interest spending is going to rise to $915 billion by 2028, or 13% of all outlays, and 3.1% of gross domestic product. Along that path, the government is expected to pass the following milestones. We'll spend more on interest than we spend on Medicaid in 2020. By 2023, more than we spend on national defense. By 2025, more than we spend on all non-defense discretionary programs combined, from funding for national parks to scientific research. In other words, we are spending ourselves into oblivion, and neither party has an interest in curbing this. Democrats don't have an interest in curbing this because they like the spending. Eventually, it's going to lead us to Nordic tax rates, which is exactly what they want. This is why they're talking about blowing out the debt even further. They want Medicare for all. They want free college. All of this is going to cost tens of trillions of dollars over the next 10 to 15 years. They don't care about that because in the end, what they actually want is a middle-class tax hike. You can't tax the rich enough in this country to pay for all this stuff. Everybody on the left knows this. They're lying about it. What they want is 60% tax rates for everybody making above 50 grand in the country, because that's what the tax rates are in places like Norway and Sweden and Denmark. So Democrats are fine with all of this, and they're lying about what costs us money. They say, well, it's the war in Iraq or the war in Afghanistan. It's the tax cuts. That is not the stuff that is bankrupting the country. The stuff that is bankrupting the country is Social Security, Medicaid, Medicare. It is those three programs that represent something like 60% of the entire American budget. Meanwhile, Republicans are gun shy of this stuff for good reason. They are deeply afraid that if they touch any of these third rails, then their political support will collapse, which is why President Trump has made it a point never to talk about entitlement reform. He doesn't want to touch entitlement reform. He's afraid of entitlement reform. Paul Ryan will leave office without having touched entitlement reform. And all this means is that we are going to run this car right over the cliff. And then we'll have two parties that are either that are having arguments about cutting around the edges, right? Austerity programs around the edges, or raising taxes dramatically. And that's because right now we don't have a principled enough American people. In the end, it's up to the voters to actually do the right thing here. The American people are not calling for the sort of structural changes that are necessary because they don't see the crisis until the crisis actually materializes. I was part of the Tea Party. I'm old enough to remember when we talked about fiscal responsibility. Let's be frank about this. President Trump has blown out the debt. Okay, Barack Obama blew out the debt. President Trump is blowing out the debt. Right now, the debt is rising at faster rates than it was under Barack Obama, largely because of the tax cuts, but also because Trump has not slowed spending in any serious way. Republicans are so deeply afraid of touching this issue that they are going to leave office without ever having touched the issue, which is going to lead to economic chaos. Because the other thing to remember is all the other countries that have been able to blow out their debt to GDP ratio, they've always been able to rely on the economic growth provided by the United States. What happens when the United States is no longer providing that economic growth because we've had to undergo these massive tax increases or because we've had to undergo massive austerity? Things could get very ugly very quickly. If we don't start to take a look at these issues, then bad things are going to happen.